So I'm going to start just by sharing a little bit about some of the reasoning behind using stories in the classroom, in the music education classroom. And the first thing that I'm going to say is that a lot of what we're seeing in in neurological research and in education is that sound stories can help students to understand and retain storylines more effectively. And in a music classroom, that might not seem like the most important thing since we're there really to have the students have a musical experience, to have them learn about music, about the elements of music, how to make connections within their families, among their friends by making music together. But more often than ever, we're seeing our school administrators looking toward us to help use the arts, to use the music education classroom and setting to support language development. And I really have seen that more since the 2020 pandemic, where we've seen the scores dropping and students struggling a little bit more with their reading. So when we think of stories without musical elements, often we're going to be thinking about things that like food that doesn't really have seasoning. You have all of the ingredients present, but maybe it's not just quite engaging. But when students use rhythm and they use vocal expression to bring stories to life, they start to have fun, but they also start to develop that phonological awareness that we need to develop those language skills and that are also foundational for reading. And they're also building emotional intelligence by exploring different rhythmic patterns and the vocal qualities within them as they convey their different feelings, right? So, what I want to look at today is this idea of sound stories. How do we explore music? How do we explore narratives together to enhance those language skills, but also by fostering creativity and cultural awareness? So, when we're looking at sound stories, we're looking to enhance comprehension. So sound stories will enhance narrative comprehension because they foster narrative comprehension by linking musical elements like rhythm and melody to words. It helps them retain storylines more effectively. And then we look at rhythm and expression, using rhythm, using vocal expression so that children can bring stories to life. And this helps enhance their engagement and it helps explore their emotions and their connections with stories. And there are quite a few approaches that we can take. And that's going to be my main focus today is sharing those different approaches that we can take in our music education classrooms in order to help students retain the meaning behind stories, to help them get excited about reading, to get excited about exploring sound with words, and to get them excited also about singing and bringing in the important things that we do in singing, like solfege, and helping them to learn to read music on the staff and also read music through iconic notation. We can take a rhythm focus by incorporating rhythm-based activities into storytelling. We can take a pitch awareness approach, right, where we're looking at modulating our voice, using different pitches to create different tones and create narratives that are engaging for our students and for our audience too, if we want to bring this to an audience. And then we can bring in dynamic contrast in terms of loud and soft. So I'm going to start with the most basic way that we can have a sound story. And this is one of my favorite books to share with my elementary school students. And I say I go up to grade 3 with this particular book over in the Meadow. And this is the John Feyerabend edition that, I just got on Amazon, but they also sell it in the First Steps in Music packet that you can get at West Music. And the simplest way we can tell a story through sound is by taking the book, sharing the beautiful pictures. I hope we can see that to the beautiful turtle there. With our students and just singing over in the meadow in the sand and the sun lived an old mother turtle and her little turtle one. Dig, said the mother, I dig, said the one. So he dug and was glad in the sound and the sun. And we show them the beautiful pictures of the foxes. And we might tell them, have we ever seen a fox? And talk to the children about the different animals that they see. Because most children really do love animals and get excited to talk about and tell what their experiences are. We might then start to sing. Over in the meadow where the tall grasses grow lived an old mother fox and her little foxes too. Run, said the mother, we run, said the two. So they ran and were glad where the tall grasses grew. And these stories over in the meadow, these are traditional stories. This one comes out of the United Kingdom and it's been shared orally through tradition. So this the words that I have, the text that I have here in this book is different from the text that I have here on the screen, right? Showing you in the example. But in the example, if I was working with some older children, maybe second graders, third graders, right? And they wanted to try to find ways to bring the song more to life, we might incorporate some instruments. So I have some instruments here with me today, and I'm at my dining room table, so it's a little bit tricky. It's not a perfect system, but here I have the colored tone chimes. You can hear them here. And if you look here, we have over in the meadow starting on the pitch G. It's got a kind of, I hope you can see it, but it's kind of shaded behind the darkened text. And I might start here and give a student the mallet and show them the correct way to hold the mallet and say, okay, could you play me four tas before we start singing the song? And it helps set the pitch up for them. Over in the meadow, in the sand and the sun, lives an old mother turtle and her little turtle one. And then we go to the word dig, and I might take out the wood blocks here and use the sandpaper here to go. Dig, said the mother, we dig, said the one. So he dug all the day in the sand and the sun. And then as we start our next verse, back to our bells, right? And then we're going to use different instruments. And you can see here in this example that the instruments there are lined out behind, right? So I might then take, where is my, yeah, my tambourine? Over in the meadow where the stream runs blue lived an old mother fish and her little fishes too. Swim, said the mother, we swim, said the two. So they swam and they kept where the stream runs blue, and just use those variety of instruments and help the students to kind of see where is the pulse of music. So we might work on steady beat with our littlest learners, right? So we have our young learners with us and maybe we give them our lollipop drums, right? And have them, okay, let's keep a steady beat as we sing this song today, right? Over in the meadow, I can't see, over in the meadow, in the sand and the sun, and help them establish that skill, that steady beat skill that they might be working on then in kindergarten. And then these students, as they hear the melody and they hear the rhythm, they're going to see these words, they're going to see the repetition. If you're using a smartboard in your classroom, you could project this up on the screen. If you're a little bit more traditional and you want to have those papers, what I like to do with some of these sorts of things is laminate these at the beginning of the year and have like 10 for a class of 20 that the students can share so they can see the text and make those connections, right, to the words that they're reading in the songs. As I said before, we also are seeing our school administrators saying, hey, we'd really like it if you could bring some reading skills, if you could bring language skills into your curriculum. And I will say myself, I am someone who often will hear myself saying out loud, can't we just teach music because it's music and music is amazing and it does so many incredible things to help people be more human. We don't need to be connected to math or connected to ELA to support who we are as teachers and the value of the work we do. And I do believe that. However, there is some merit, right, to making these connections, to making cross-curricular connections for the students, because often our littlest learners don't necessarily see the connections that they could be making between the class that they have with their homeroom teacher who's teaching ELA and the class that they have with you, and what that work means and what language does within music. So we can take the ELA standards. I just adapted some of the Common Core standards for English language arts to make them more cohesive for like a K1-2 grouping of students. But showing them the story, the read aloud that we just did in our Over in the Meadow song. What animal did we begin with today? The turtle. What were the baby turtles doing? ask questions, answer questions about the details in the text. These are things that their students are going to be working on in their general education classrooms too. You might ask the students, what do they hear? What do they think? What do they not understand about what they just read? Maybe they don't know about turtles, or maybe they don't know about what fish are doing where. Today I did a lesson using a story that was about a cuckoo bird that was looking to make friends in Iceland. It had been shared with me by a woman named Katie Bright. And it's a beautiful presentation. But some of the animals that are in there in Iceland, the students had never seen before, except in video games like the Arctic fox. So they were really surprised at what the real Arctic fox looked like compared to what they saw in their video games. We were able to talk about what these animals were, what kind of sounds they make, and then sing about them with, just little songs that are made up. And we'll get into that in just a few minutes about just making up our own tunes in order to connect with the students. And then we can go further to describe the people, places, animals, things, events, details, ideas, and feelings that we have as we explore stories and have those conversations. Because another thing that we are seeing in the arts as well is that request of how are we bringing social stories into what we're doing with the students? How are we looking at social and emotional development? And music has such a natural way to bring that together, and through stories is one of those ways. Here I'm sharing with you a lesson, and I'm not going to go through it in tremendous detail, but a way to use a story that was really popular when I was little. But we don't hear a lot of these fairy tale-like stories anymore, but there is value to them because there's repetition within them, and there's usually morals to the story and so on. So here, and I've got the information about where this lesson could be purchased on Teachers Pay Teachers, is the story of the Billy Goat's Gruff. And it's taking an Orff approach to this using xylophones. And I know not everybody has xylophones in their rooms, but you can adapt anything for anything, really, if you're creative and you take a few minutes to just kind of think of the ways that you can help those students make the connections with the text and with the music. So here, I'm just going to pull out my xylophone here. And like I said, oops, and there goes everything. Um, with the younger kids, and with this, like I said, this would be something that the Billy Goat Gruff, I would do this with first grade, second grade. And, at the beginning, I have here, my regular alto xylophone, and I'm going to prep it, right? And remove any of the unnecessary bars, right? And remind the students of things like the bigger the bar, the lower the sound, the smaller the bar, the higher the sound, and just kind of remind them of the physics of that. I'll often show a picture of a tuba, right, versus a piccolo. So they remember the difference in the how high and how low this music will sound because of that. Okay, and then say, we're going to use this music, we're going to use the music to help bring the story to life. And in our story today, each character has got a different sound for them. So we would say, okay, our middle Billy Goat Gruff is played on the medium-sized bar, and we give them that G to E, okay, without the note B there, and say, okay, so we're going to play the Billy Goat Gruff like this. Right? And make it sound. And then the smaller the bar, the higher the sound. So the littlest Billy Goat Gruff is going to be all the way up at the top of the xylophone. And we're going to use several techniques. So if we're doing the middle Billy Goat Gruff, we'll play G and A together, doing T, 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 ta, ta, middle Billy Goat Gruff. And have the students use those jumping hands, right? Teaching them proper technique as they go, teaching them how to use those mallets, and sharing those stories. And we go through and you can see we've got different examples. We've got our trip, trap, trip, trap, trip, trap, trip, trap, and so on, going up and down, and bringing in those techniques for the instrument, for the xylophone, and those musical elements, looking at the rhythm that we're using, reminding them of the TT versus the ta and how those rhythms sound, using words to help reinforce the rhythms, all things that are bringing in the music elements while reinforcing what happens when we're telling a story. Okay, and there's just some more using the tremolo, demonstrating arrest and how we can, bounce down the water, right? In our splish splash gone. And then we go and we do the story. So we show them the three characters, remind them what sounds we associated with them, and go through the whole story where the students can all make music together. And keep in mind too, like I said, I know not everyone's going to have a classroom set of xylophones, but we can make adaptations as we need using any instrument that we like. It's just an example. And so this takes us through the Billy Goat Gruff story. And the students can read it together, or we can assign a student who wants to be a reader or a group of students, right? And make it seem like it's a reader's theater type of a project. While some students use the instruments, other students are reading. They could take turns. There's lots of approaches to keep those students engaged. This here you can see, was created here by Kimberly Guessween, I guess, and you go and can take a look at that. I'm not going to pull this one up here, but I wanted to show this to you today too, in terms of telling stories in class. I know that one of the issues that I'm seeing often in my district and throughout Connecticut are my high school and middle school teacher friends asking elementary school specialists, what are you doing in your classroom to help reinforce music reading for singers, to help them be more confident when they get to the middle school and high school, right? And they want to participate in a chorus where I'm going to give them music to read, right? And it can be tricky, right, to get students to engage with music reading, especially when it comes to solfege. And one of the tools that I've been using over the past 8 years or so is called Pitch Hill. And you can go take a look at this on the Teachers Pay Teacher site and just type in Pitch Hill. And there are some free examples that you can take a look at. And what happens is the author of this material has chosen to create stories for each solfege pitch to help the students retain. So one of the things that I'll do is I will take a storybook. And in this case, the example that I'm going to use is a book called If Tornadoes Could Ring Doorbells. And this book here was written by my college roommate. Her name is Missy, and Miriam Tedesco, and her son, who is a first grader in public school on Long Island. And they put together this story because we've had some crazy storms over the past few years, right? And children get nervous in these stories. So this is really a social story, right? Something that our school administrators might say, hey, we're having some trouble with this behavior, or we're looking to support students having these issues at home. Let's use what we have in social emotional learning to help support them, right? So here, this story is dealing with some of those issues, right? But we're in music class, so we don't want to just read that to our classes and just be like, okay, here's your story about not being scared in a storm. Okay, here we go. Okay, great, bye. Instead, take a look at some of the ways that we can engage them with some singing. So I will say to the students, for example, okay, so here we are. We have our first note here, and just using those standard boomwhacker colors, that we'll see with boomwhackers and bells. If people are not sure what I mean, you can see this here with the tone chimes, right? So, red being Joe, orange being Ray, yellow being me. So in keeping that sort of consistent, since, if you're using those types of materials, it's good to just kind of have them consistent. And say, okay, so here we have fa. Fa's on our first space. And in the Pitch Hill story, they talk about each character. So for example, fa presents as a girl and is wearing a green dress. And she's kind of a grouch, and we call her Grumpy Fa. And I say, you know what? Thumbs down. I know this is higher than it should be for solfege, but because of the way the camera is, I'm gonna have to put it here. Let me see if I can move it down. So Grumpy Fa, right? Thumbs down for Grumpy Fa. Then we've got Soul, who we call Scaredy Cat Soul, and he presents as a boy wearing teal, and he's afraid of everything. And when he sees people, he goes, and so we help the students remember, our solfa symbols, so that they're able to retain that and use that as they sing. And I'm finding that with my students, the more I tell the stories, and they can make up stories about these characters too, right? They engage and remember more about what these syllables are, what their names are, and how they're used on the staff. I know my students in particular like Hungry La, because Hungry La, we make our hands like this. And one of the kids like, oh, Hungry La, like McDonald's. And they'll all go, oh, yeah, Hungry La, ba-da-ba-ba-ba. None of those kids are going to forget La, solfege symbol, for the rest of their lives. Because when we put these ideas together with music, it helps it stick in their minds. So I go through all of this, remind the students what characters, and then we'll go through and practice a little bit too. And like, okay, so here we said this is our first line. It's yellow, right? And we'll tell them a story. So in this particular character fell off the monkey bars, hit his head, and now his head is flat. And now we have got flathead me on our first line. And then the students remember, same thing, grumpy fast. So I start with the open note. I'll bring it to the color, right, to help them if they can't get it without the color. And then I'll remind them, they'll announce, who the character is and what hand sign we're using for it. Same, going all the way through, just to kind of give you an idea, right? So then we get through the drilling, essentially, to remind them of the notes and so on. And then here I've got, and some of it got a little wonky with the moving from Google Slides to PowerPoint, but that is what it is. But we'll start with the open notes here, and I'll have like, okay, so we've got our second line. Does anybody remember what that is? And if they don't, okay, so I might, just pull it up or see if I can prompt them to look at the chart that I have above my smartboard to remind them, right? So here we have here, as after we go through it all and the students answer questions. And one of the things too that I'll say about this is when we do that, I'll often have the kids go, like a kid go up and touch the screen, because that's something that, for whatever reason, the little ones find to be great payoff, right? They want to go up there and touch that smartboard. And we'll get this all up here, right? And then go and put some words here, right? And so work on singing like sol, sol, mi, la, sol, mi, and have this kids do it with the solfege, or say, if tornadoes could ring doorbells, and go through the song with them. And then what I'll do is I'll read through the story with them, and the meaning and so on throughout. So here in this story, it says, if tornadoes could ring doorbells, would you go get the door? And then we'll stop after that first page and sing the song again. Or would you make your dad go first while you crept up on the floor? And talking about, like, what did, this adult do? How did that adult make you feel better about the storm? If tornadoes could ring doorbells, would mom invite it for tea? What kind of tea do tornadoes drink? I don't know. It's news to me. And then we'll go through and we'll sing the song again and help the students engage. And remember, what are they singing? What are they reading? What is the solfege syllables? What are the rhythms? How are we helping the students? And then at the end, by the time we get to the end of the story, we would then be able to talk about the message. And is the tornado something to be scared of? Well, if it's a tornado, it actually might be something to be scared of. But what can we do to keep ourselves safe, right? Or we might say maybe it's not that we're reading a different book, right? It's just an ordinary rainstorm. Well, then we might not be scared at all. We just need to just sit calmly and quietly and take deep breaths and help those students have some coping skills, and to help themselves think through the things that they need to do to help themselves feel safe in situations that might be a little bit different. Okay. And so I'll set them up with a routine. We'll start by singing, these are my glasses, this is my book, especially with the younger ones, to just kind of, okay, we're in story time, but we're still making music when we do our stories. It's not exactly the same as library special. It's not the same as ELA, but we are preparing ourselves, right, to participate in a musical experience. So I'll use that story and then go through here, this book here, if tornadoes could ring doorbells. And then I might say, okay, storms can be scary. How did the boy learn to feel less afraid, right? And so we can practice our rhythms, right? And I'll pull these up and I'll say invite. How many sounds do we hear in the word invite? And they might say two. Okay, so would that be a rhythm that would be more with ta or with tt? Invite. Is that ta or tt? And have the students explain that. And then we can go through those pages too and practice those with some rhythms. The next thing I want to just talk about a little bit too is the ways that we can invite different voices into our classroom. And I know that in some schools, in some school systems, it's gotten a little bit tricky bringing people in from the outside since the pandemic. It's been a little bit more restricted in my school system, but we've had some success bringing people in. But the people who are right in front of us, our students, our learners, are really special and really important. And asking them about their background and finding ways to ensure that they feel valued, respected, and heard in the music education classroom goes a really far way. I am in the city of Waterbury. We have in the past few years gotten a larger influx of students from the Middle East. We had been a predominantly Italian and Albanian community for a very long time. And now we're seeing more South American, Latin American, and Middle Eastern students. And when I asked some of the students, oh, well, where is your family from? They told me that they were from Pakistan. And it turned out that they were not being totally honest. They were being coached by their families because they're actually from Palestine. And there was so much anxiety of the parent on the parents' parts about how these children would be treated because of this, the beliefs that people have about issues in the Middle East related to Palestine. It's been kind of a tricky thing, but when the students told me that they were from Palestine, I went and I bought these beautiful books. I'm sorry, from Pakistan, about Pakistan. I learned a lot about Pakistan, and the students get to learn about it too. And we'll be doing stories from Palestine as well now that I know. But asking the students and looking at some of these beautiful books that are available that make these connections to music can really be helpful. So here in this book here, it's called Music of the Mountains, A Story in Pakistan. It's a story about a little girl who is learning to play a musical instrument and her grandfather is helping her. And some of the challenges they face working together as a small child and an older person. And then the book at the end addresses things like where is Pakistan? Where are these children? Where is this child from? What is this instrument? Where is this on the map? Why would we play this? What are the things that happen in this community? And so inviting those conversations can be really meaningful for the students. I also have this book here about Shabbat for people who that have students who are from the Jewish tradition or from schools that don't have students from the Jewish tradition who you want to introduce some of that culture to. And this here introduces different music from Shabbat that's more traditional. In my school system, we have literally 0 students in my school that who are Jewish. And so that experience would be completely a window into a different lived experience than my students are experiencing, as opposed to what we often see are those mirrors back to their own experiences. So these are those 2 books here, Music of the Mountains, A Story of Pakistan, and Bim and Bam, A Shabbat Tale. And just some interesting ways to engage students a little bit differently, right? And have them think about ways that we can enhance their engagement in creative ways and make those cultural connections within the classroom. We can also, find other ways to bring stories to life as well. So I'm very lucky in that, I've been able to do a lot of donors choose projects, find ways to bring different instruments into my classroom. Sometimes we can't do that, right? It's not necessarily possible. There's different rules and different school systems and so on. But what we do have are our students' brains. We have their hearts. We have their experiences, and they can share that all with us, and we can make up our own stories. We can talk about things that the students are concerned with. We can't get the book about the tornado. That's okay. What's a storm that's happened in your community? What can we talk about? How would we recreate a thunderstorm? How could we recreate, and what would we use? Oh, we don't have any instruments. Well, we can use our bodies. We can use our voices. We can use our shoes. We can do whatever we need to do to find ways to be creative and explore in order to help these students bring stories to life and think about the ways we can make meaning through words that corresponds with the musical elements that we are here to teach in our classrooms.